Welcome to Disexplainer. Today, we're going to unpack a fascinating and frankly kind of alarming diagnostic report on modern society. We're looking at the profound systemic damage caused by our absolute obsession with winning at all costs. I'll be your guide as we explore how a seemingly healthy, motivational idea has slowly metastasized into something highly destructive. We're going to trace this whole phenomenon from our classrooms, through our boardrooms, and right down into the daily anxieties of our everyday lives. We're not just looking at the symptoms here. We want to understand the actual root cause of this cultural exhaustion.
So, let's start with a provocative question. What happens when winning becomes literally more important than reality? It's a concept that hooks right into the core issue we're facing today. Think about it. When the only thing that matters, the only thing you're actually rewarded for, is crossing that finish line first, you eventually stop looking at how you're running the race, right? The rules just become obstacles rather than boundaries. So we're going to trace exactly how standard, healthy ambition slowly mutates into outright fraud, extreme burnout, and some pretty deep moral compromise.
Okay, let's define the baseline disease. You probably know it by a few popular names like hustle culture or the winning culture. Essentially, it's a societal mindset that places success, status, and victory above absolutely everything else. Ethics, well-being, fairness, you name it. It is deeply embedded in everyday life, from the structure of capitalism to the way we consume sports and entertainment. This ideology loudly promotes the belief that any means justify the end, just as long as that end results in profit or social advancement. It turns life into a zero-sum game. Basically, if you aren't winning, you're inherently losing. To make sense of this, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The winning culture disease. 2. Contagion in education and sports. 3. Corporate fraud and greed. 4. The hidden human cost. And 5. The blueprint for change. Let's get right into it. Part 1. The winning culture disease. Let's examine the foundational illusion driving this whole sickness. We've all been sold this specific, comforting story since we were kids, right? The myth of a pure meritocracy. The idea that success comes purely from talent and hard work, and the cream simply rises to the top. But look, the data completely shatters that narrative. In the US, 50% of a father's income position is inherited by his son. Compare that to countries like Norway or Canada, where it's less than 20%. The economic mobility just isn't what we think it is. On top of that, only 8% of children raised in the bottom 20% of income ever climb to the top 20% as adults. And if we look at recent cultural moments like the elite college admissions scandal, Operation Varsity Blues, we see a glaring irony. Wealthy families were literally bribing their way into elite universities. It proves that the game isn't just intensely competitive. It's often fundamentally rigged to protect the people who are already winning. Moving on to Part 2, Contagion in Education and Sports. 95%. That is the staggering proportion of high school students who have participated in some form of cheating, whether that's glancing at a test, plagiarizing an essay, or copying homework. Just a tiny 5% sliver of students abstain. Now, when you ask why this is happening, 71% of those who cheat cite the crushing pressure to get good grades. Put yourself in the shoes of a 16-year-old in this environment. Our education system has inadvertently become a breeding ground for fraud, simply because the intense competition for college admissions leaves students feeling like playing by the rules is a guaranteed way to fail. And technology? It's acting as a massive accelerant to this problem. Look at the year-over-year spike in just a 12-month window. In 2024, 53% of students use generative AI for assessments. By 2025, that number skyrocketed to an absolutely wild 88%. That's an incredibly alarming jump. The underlying pressure to succeed hasn't changed at all, but the tools to bypass the actual learning process have become drastically more accessible. We're creating a system that completely rewards producing the right answer over actually understanding the material. And this contagion bleeds directly into sports. The U.S. anti-doping agency famously called Lance Armstrong's operation the most sophisticated, professionalized, and successful doping program that sport has ever seen. Armstrong was an American icon, 7 consecutive Tour de France titles. But that win-at-all-costs culture demanded an impossible standard of perfection. What is truly terrifying here is the sheer scale of it all. 20 out of the 21 top 3 finishers during Armstrong's winning years were also found to have doped at some point. It wasn't just a few bad apples. Honestly, it wasn't even a bike race anymore. It was a chemistry experiment. The entire ecosystem was infected by this absolute mandate to win. Which brings us to Part 3, Corporate Fraud and Greed.
When we move from schools and sports into the boardroom, the financial and ethical stakes escalate drastically. We can trace a clear historical pattern here of ambition crossing the line straight into criminality. Back in 2001, Enron became the textbook example of short-term earnings obsession. They literally installed stock tickers inside the company elevators. Imagine being stressed out, and you can't even take a 30-second elevator ride without the share price glaring at you, demanding you close deals regardless of reality. Then came Theranos. Over 15 years, a culture of intense fear was used to silence any employees who realized their revolutionary blood testing technology simply didn't work. And in 2016, we saw the Wells Fargo scandal. Driven by a catchy little motto of 8 is great, meaning employees had to push 8 financial products onto every customer, workers created 3.5 million unauthorized accounts just to survive aggressive, totally unrealistic sales quotas.
When you actually tally up the fallout, the numbers are just hard to comprehend. Enron costed shareholders $74 billion, wiping out the life savings of its very own employees. Theranos collapsed a $9 billion valuation while putting actual patients at severe medical risk with fake test results. Wells Fargo paid over $3 billion in legal settlements. But the true cost isn't just financial. It's the collateral damage to society's trust. We're looking at millions of devalued degrees from academic cheating, lifetime bans in professional sports, and thousands of honest jobs lost. When a society worships winning above all else, the very foundation of trust just rots away.
Part 4. The hidden human cost. Let's look beyond the headlines. $210.5 billion. Take a second to really let the size of that number sink in. That is the estimated annual cost to the U.S. economy, caused specifically by unresolved depression and drastically reduced productivity. When the pressure to perform never ever stops, the human mind simply cannot keep up. People burn out. And the macroeconomic drain of that collective exhaustion, it's basically equivalent to setting hundreds of billions of dollars on fire every single year.
To make that macroeconomic data deeply personal, think about the daily reality for the modern workforce. 80% of employees report having productivity anxiety. That constant nagging feeling, maybe you're checking emails in bed or feeling intensely guilty for just taking a normal lunch break, that you should be doing more no matter how much you've already accomplished? Yeah, that's it. 77% experienced work-related stress in just the last month alone. We are looking at a workforce plagued by emotional exhaustion and a total lack of motivation. Hustle culture isn't just making people tired, it's actively deteriorating our mental health. And from a purely business standpoint, we have to understand this fundamental truth. Fear kills creativity. When you create a highly competitive environment obsessed with short-term targets, you completely eliminate psychological safety. Think about how this plays out in a toxic office. Instead of building a better product together, employees are basically incentivized to find flaws in their colleagues' work. Instead of building a better mousetrap, you survive by breaking your neighbor's mousetrap. When leaders prioritize internal winning at the expense of collaboration, companies don't innovate, they stagnate, and they slowly die from the inside out. Finally, Part 5, the blueprint for change. Let's talk solutions. Fixing this deeply ingrained system requires a multi-level blueprint. It starts right at the individual level, shifting our own mindset away from constant comparison and toward personal growth and effort. Educationally, schools must abolish competitive class ranking to reduce that zero-sum pressure that literally drives cheating. Corporately, businesses have to redesign their incentives. We need to toss out those cutthroat individual bonuses and instead reward the entire team's success, actively measuring employee health alongside profit margins. And legislatively, now this is provocative but absolutely necessary, there need to be strict laws enforcing personal jail time for unethical executives. If leadership only faces a corporate fine paid by shareholders, well, that's just the cost of doing business, right? When the system severely punishes fraud at the very top, behavior automatically changes. By contrasting the toxic reality with a healthy alternative, we get a really clear vision of what a reformed society actually looks like. Instead of believing winning is everything, growth and learning become everything. We trade cutthroat individual competition for collective collaboration, recognizing that we achieve way more together. And most importantly, we abandon the dangerous idea that the end justifies the means. In a healthy culture, the means, how you achieve your goals, how you treat people along the way, your ethics, they matter exactly as much as the end result itself. Which brings us to our final defining question. Look, the goal of this explainer isn't to tell you to eliminate ambition. Ambition is a powerful, necessary, and wonderful force. The goal is to redirect it. So instead of constantly asking yourself, how do I win?
I want to leave you with this to ponder. How do you succeed while preserving your humanity, your health, and your ethics? Take this blueprint, reflect on your own environment, and let's start changing the culture together.